Hello and welcome to Ayuda's Community Legal Interpreter Bank webinar for Montgomery County Legal Service Providers. My name is Egbert Ospina. I'm one of the Language Access Coordinators. The other Language Access Coordinator is Kendra Carson, and you may be receiving emails from either of us. My contact information is on this slide. It's egbert@ayuda.com, but you can always reach us at interpreterbank@ayuda.com. The entire team, including Marilyn and David, all have access to interpreterbank@ayuda.com, and that's always the best way to get in touch with us. So today's presentation, we're going to cover two topics. The first is just going to be a quick overview on the in-person interpretation services that we offer. The second is going to delve into the new document translation services. So this year we received a grant from the Montgomery County Executive that allows us to provide this service. So we just wanted to make sure we go over in-person interpretation. Just for some of you who may be new, some of you who may be trying this services for the first time in a long time. And also, I'm going to touch upon a few key things that are related to specialty or niche requests, particularly ASL, that I think will be a good thing to go over for everyone. So the languages we offer are in this list. We cover about 25 languages, and we have about 90 interpreters in our legal interpreter bank. So now, what are our interpreters? They are highly trained. They have at least 40 hours of foundational training. They completed a language service training, which we offer here, but is also offered in other organizations in the area called Language of Justice. And we also test them on their language proficiency. Now, the key points that I wanted to talk about related to American Sign Language is that American Sign Language requests are slightly different than in-person spoken language requests. And the main difference is that sign language is always conducted simultaneously. And that means that while you speak, they render what you say into sign in real time. And then they render what is signed into spoken as it is being signed. This is a more strenuous version of interpretation, and studies have shown that interpreters, after about 20 to 30 minutes, the accuracy of what they interpret begins to decline. What that means is that our policy, and typically the policy around the industry, is that ASL interpreters will not work a 90-minute assignment an assignment that lasts longer than 90 minutes alone. So if you have an assignment that lasts longer than 90 minutes, we'll have to send 2 ASL interpreters. For assignments that are at 90 minutes, we still like to ask the interpreter whether they feel comfortable covering that assignment alone, because some interpreters are still not comfortable working an assignment 90 minutes alone. Now, there is another version of interpreting that also uses sign, which is done by certified deaf interpreters. Now, certified deaf interpreters are deaf individuals who have a specialty in communicating across different versions of deaf communication. Certified deaf interpreters would be used for interpreting between someone who is not from the United States into American Sign Language, as different countries may have different versions of sign language. They are also used for people who may have been brought up in a household that didn't use American Sign Language. So many deaf people may have grown up without language, and so the signs that they use are not understood by American Sign Language hearing interpreters. And then another category that we typically see is underage deaf individuals typically also benefit from the use of a CDI, a certified deaf interpreter. And then finally, victims of trauma. As victims of trauma, if they recalling traumatic experiences, sometimes their signing can be a little bit difficult for the American Sign Language interpreters. And a CDI is very helpful to bridge that gap, to bridge that that those confusions that the ASL interpreter may have. So now, when you're working with ASL interpreters, please keep in mind that ASL interpreters are in very high demand, and some of them book their schedules weeks, if not months in advance. So because ASL interpreters are so difficult to book, we ask that you place requests for sign language interpreters at least 2 weeks in advance. And that is especially the case if you need ASL interpreters and CDIs, and if the assignment is longer than 90 minutes. So when you place a request for an ASL interpreter, we will get an email that will notify us, and we'll be able to check the request. We'll be able to look through the request, see if there's anything that alerts us to the fact that this session may need a CDI, or this session may need multiple interpreters. But it's a good idea, if whenever you place a request, to follow up with us. And if you're not sure whether you need a CDI, please let us know, because sometimes, you may not realize that your client needs a CDI. Your client may have been born in another country, may be experiencing some trauma, and sometimes it's good, just to be safe, to send in a CDI to those assignments as well, just to allow for the optimal communication with your clients. So now, the way that you submit interpreter requests is through Salesforce. And I will go into greater depth onto how to submit requests into Salesforce a little bit later at the end of the presentation. I'm sure that many of you have already worked with Salesforce, have already submitted requests through Salesforce, so I don't want to delve in too deep right now. But if you're interested in learning more, just stay posted until the end of this webinar. Now, I also wanted to mention really quick that Salesforce will also be used in the future for submitting translation requests. At least that's what we're working towards. We're expecting hopefully that can happen within the next 3 months or so. And so when that happens, we'll just notify you about what the procedure will be. It'll be very similar to submitting in-person interpretation requests. So now, if you're ever having trouble using Salesforce, if you are not your organization's liaison or point of contact with Ayuda's language access program, then you should refer to them first and see if they know how to log on to Salesforce, or if they know how to submit a request for either document translations or in-person interpretation. If you are not the point of contact and are learning to become the point of contact, or if you are the point of contact and if maybe you haven't used our services in a while, you're new to the language access program, there's another resource that you can use, which is our step-by-step Salesforce guide. And I will click on this link that will take you to the guide right now. So now, this is the guide that will take you step by step. It's quite in-depth, and we do try to make it as clear as possible, like every single step that you will encounter, in order to make it as smooth as possible to submitting requests. Now, the main thing I wanted to draw your attention to, which I've seen before, Salesforce is manageable if you just, it's not too complicated. But one thing that people oftentimes trip on is, what is your username? And the Salesforce guide is a good way to remind yourself of what that is. The username is just interpreter at whatever your organization's email is. So here are some examples that you can look at. Now, if you forgot your password, you'll have to email us, and we will be able to reset the password for you. And I just wanted to show you really quick, if you're ever don't know where to find this Salesforce step-by-step guide, you can always visit our website at ayuda.com. You hover over this tab, What We Do, and you can select language services. Once you click that, it'll take you to the page where you'll be able to go to civil legal service providers. Here in this drop down, you'll go to the big purple button that says Civil Legal Service Provider Forms. Then you'll want to select the drop down for civil legal service providers versus the bottom one, that's victims. So you want to go to the legal service providers, and as you are all Montgomery County legal service providers, you will not find any relevant information in the victims section. So then you want to scroll all the way down to the Montgomery County section. And here you can find the step-by-step guide using Salesforce to request an interpreter. And that'll just take you to where we were just looking before. We'll also upload our document translation request form, which I'm going to get to just in a little bit here. So now that I covered Salesforce, just the basics, let's move on to document translations because those are not yet on Salesforce. So this process for submitting a document translation, if you can see clearly enough on this slide, it's about 5 or so steps. The first step is that you, the provider, you submit a translation request form to us. What you do is you send an email with the translation request form and the document you wish to translate as an attachment. Once we receive that email, we'll process the request form and we'll forward it to a third-party translation service. So that's one thing I want to emphasize is that we do not translate documents ourselves. Our interpreters are only spoken language interpreters, which is a very different skill from translation. Translation is rendering one language, one written form of language into another. And so some of our interpreters may be translators, but we do not compensate them for translation services. So even if you have an interpreter who says to you, yes, I do translations, please keep in mind that they do not do translations through Ayuda. So we send them to a third-party translation service. We use MCS, Multicultural Community Services, and Schreiber Translations. When they receive the translation request, they return to us a proposal, which we then have to approve. The proposal just says the rate and when we can expect to receive the document by. The date that we receive the document is based on the date that you inform us on the request form. Once we get that, we sign it and we send it back to them, and then they will tell us when we can expect to receive the document by, and they just send us a confirmation email. At that point, we'll send you a confirmation email that we have approved your translation request and the date that you can expect to receive it by. If we use Schreiber Translation, then you can expect to receive the document, the completed document from us, from interpreterbank@ayuda.com. But if we use Multicultural Community Services, then you can expect to receive the document directly from them, from lspcoordinator@mcsdc.org. So don't be surprised if you find an email from MCS if you've submitted a translation request. That's just a difference in their procedures. And finally, if you have anything that you need to if you have any questions, concerns, or updates to the document translation, please let us know directly. Sometimes if you communicate directly with the MCS, it may be confusing because if, say, you have an update to the document, that may update the price, and if you don't keep us in the loop, then we'll totally be very confused and we'll have no idea of what happened to the charge or how much the document translation services are actually going to cost us. So please either communicate to us directly, or if you do have just a quick question, even if it doesn't have anything to do with updating the document, just like a quick question saying, say you requested a certificate of translation, you can email them, hey, I requested a certificate of translation, but please CC us in that communication so that we are in the know always. Okay, so I wanted to show you the translation request form. So I think it would just be easier to go straight to the document and to look through it as you will be looking through it on your computer. So it's pretty self-explanatory. You know, you fill out the spaces that need to be filled out, requesting organization, attorney, this is the person who's submitting the request, and this is the person, the name of the individual who the document will be sent to. Please include the name and the email for both so that that's the easiest way for us to get in touch with you. If you want to include your phone number, please do. Please do actually include the phone number for the requesting attorney so we can call you if anything, if we have any questions, and especially if it's a short notice request. So we want you to give us a little bit of more detail if you have any more details of the client's dialect or region. The date translation. If you don't need the document translated by a certain day, you know, you don't put ASAP. Sometimes the translators think that means that you actually need it very soon, and so they'll send us a quote for a rush fee. If you don't need it, if you actually don't need it in a very short amount of time, then you just, you know, put a note there that says no rush needed, or something along those lines. As I said before, everything is quite self-explanatory. If you have any additional notes, you can include them in this section. And then finally, the key part that I wanted to bring attention to was if you need a certificate of translation. And so you just want to make sure that you check that off. Okay, so back to the presentation. This basically concludes the whole discussion about document translations and the bulk of the presentation. Now I will go and show a demonstration on how to submit a request through Salesforce. In the following presentation, I will also show you how to submit a request for an ASL and CDI interpreters. So that might be useful if you expect or if you have any questions about how to submit those types of requests. If you are very comfortable with submitting requests for ASL and CDIs and you don't need any refreshers on Salesforce, then thank you very much for taking the time already on watching this webinar. And we look forward to providing language access services to you very soon. We're still trying to finish up some details with the grantors. But it'll definitely be very soon that we start opening our services. So now, looking at the Salesforce demo, this is what you'll be seeing as a requester. Once you log in to your dashboard, you will see a page that looks much like this, except for your page will probably not have the active victim bank requests. Your page will just have active legal bank requests. And so in this section, you can see all the requests that you've made and that you can view, you can cancel here. This is actually quite important. If you cancel an assignment, please cancel it through Salesforce here by clicking this button. If you cancel with an interpreter directly via email, please CC Interpreter Bank so that we know what's going on and we can cancel the assignment through your dashboard for you. We have access to everyone's dashboards, so if you don't want to deal with the hassle of going onto Salesforce, at least let us know in the email that you're canceling the assignment. This really makes our life easier because once the assignment is canceled, the interpreters then log on to their dashboard to close out the assignment to accept payment if the assignment was canceled with less than 24 hours notice. Or for the case of ASL and CDI requests, 48 hours notice. But that's not so important for you. All you need to know is that this is a good spot to cancel the assignment. Now, to submit a request, you will click on this button up here, Legal Bank Interpreter Request for DC or Maryland client. So now here is the request form, basically, that is on Salesforce. This takes all the information that you put into there and it puts it into our database, and it sends out an email to all of our interpreters. It's a pretty self-explanatory system. This is where you put your name. If you are the point of contact, and you're submitting the request, you can click on this box and it'll populate the information on the point of contact section. So now for requesting, say you need an ASL and CDI team, please click ASL. When you do that, the page will refresh, and then the next boxes you see here. If you want to exclude a specific interpreter and you already know who you don't want to work with, you can click on that box and you can choose the interpreters who you do not want to work with from this drop down. If you need a CDI, you can check on this box. That is very important that you check on the box if you know that you need a CDI, because that way the assignment will automatically send an email to all ASL and CDI interpreters. So then you can continue going through this list, meeting date and time. Remember, we ask for 2 weeks advance for ASL. If it's a rare language, like Indonesian is a difficult language for us to fill. There's not a lot of Indonesian interpretation resources in this area. Some other small language communities, please take that into consideration as well, and give us a week's notice at least. And also it would be useful to send us an email too. If it's a language that's not very common in this area, we may have a tough time filling it with our own interpreters and may have to turn to other interpretation resources, third-party agencies. So then you want to put, this is where you would put the alternate meeting date and time in this section here. Now, another area that I want to bring special attention to is this box, the short description of session. This is a very important section to put as much detail as you can about the assignment. As much detail as possible helps the interpreters be as prepared as possible and to know what they're accepting, what they're getting into. So this is a good spot to put, you know, if the client was a victim of trauma, if the client was a victim of crime or experienced a traumatic event, if the client is underage, if the client is, you know, any type of detail also about the legal case will be important for us as well, as the interpreters need to know as much as possible going into the assignment. That's just to provide the best interpretation services. So this is really for your own benefit as well. Okay, so that's basically all the details that you need to look at or that you should take into consideration when submitting an interpreter request. Once you submit the interpreter request, you will see it on your dashboard in that section that I told you about earlier. So that basically wraps up this webinar. Again, if you have any questions, please let us know. Send us an email at interpreterbank.com. And we look forward to providing language access services in the fiscal year 19. Thank you very much.